our next speaker, I happen to know about him that he also organizes his books by color. Why? Not just because, but because as his own key user, he knows that he's looking at the books, on a daily basis a lot more often than he's actually actively pulling one out and trying to finding some information in there. So alphabetically, theme doesn't matter. What matters to him is that it's aesthetic because he's right there and he wants to see it. So he really optimized, his book system for his key user. And I think that's probably quite telling about him, right? Because Peter Boersma, our next speaker, has been working in design roles for over 25 years. He has an impressive track record working with agencies, in-house, and now as a freelancer. And he's here today to talk about optimizing other things, namely your design ops system. So let's hear it for Peter Boersma.
Thank you, Mel. Okay. Hello, Vienna. My name is Peter Boersma, and I'm a design operator. I'd like to talk to you about the many ways in which design operations, the act of improving the circumstances of design, supports design teams. So let's start with that big word, design ops. What does it mean, and why is it important to learn about it? Why is it a sort of a subfield of design that's coming up? Let me start with this quote from Adrienne Elnat. She is in Design Ops. She's a senior director of Design Ops at ServiceNow. And a couple of years ago already, she wrote, in a couple of years, so around now, we'll see that the responsibilities of design managers will evolve back to the core of being a visionary leader, managing your designers, developing them, design innovation, storytelling, and that other roles that have sort of been added to their responsibilities will move towards specialists who are called design operators, or the role of the group of design operations. So another way to say that is, do you consider these tasks design manager tasks, or are they design operations? And I'm going to try and answer that. It's design operations. These responsibilities, like defining processes, managing tools, creating all hands, building a culture of design in an organization, are slowly becoming the responsibilities of a group of people who call themselves design operators. The core definition that I've adopted is this one from an article by Kate Kaplan from the Nielsen Norman Group, who says design ops refers to the orchestration and optimization of people, processes, and craft. So designers, design processes, and design craft in order to amplify design's value and its impact. This is coming from an article called DesignOps 101. It's a little hard to read, but it's a good article. It goes on to list some sort of categories of ways in which DesignOps supports different teams, from how designers work together, how they get their work done, and how their work creates impact. Another thing she introduces is a very important thing, and I want to take a pause here. You don't need to have people whose job title says design ops. If you do, then they're sort of on the right. They have the role of design ops. It's their job. It's their responsibility. They're evaluated based on their outcome of their work. But it's also okay if there's a group of people, or even one person, one designer, who every now and then takes a step back and thinks about, how is my work organized? Can I find a way to do my work better? So, and some people have that gene in them. They have the skill or the urge to improve the circumstances for design for themselves and for their peers. They have the mindset, and they are very important in an organization. And they are also candidates to take on the role. Now, if you're considering doing this, I already mentioned this is sort of a movement, and there's already a series of communities, mostly online in Slack communities, because it's happened in the last couple of years and everything happens online. So there are Slack communities and people coming together, doing webinars and doing events around DesignOps. There's the DesignOps Assembly in a month or so. The DesignOps Summit is happening again. It's still virtual. And there's more. So there is a community. If you feel like doing this, you're not alone. And if you need to convince your boss that it's time to start working on DesignOps, Gartner already promised that around this time, by 2023, product teams that are supported by a DesignOps role will increase their revenue faster than their competitors without DesignOps teams. So it's good for business. Okay, that's DesignOps. In the rest of this talk, I want to give you show you some ways that DesignOps has supported design teams, and they're coming from my experience, and sort of roughly in order. I've had the mindset. I discovered I had this urge of wanting to change the situation for designers in my teams and for me. I've been in a situation where there was a DesignOps team and I needed them, and I've been in a situation where I was DesignOps. I was responsible for DesignOps services in the company that I was working for, and I want to walk you through those three. Starting with me having the mindset without anyone having the role of a DesignOps manager. And I have to go back to 1984, when this was my computer, and I was 14. I was making software on a company that had, on a computer that's at 16K of memory, and like, just the number 1 on that screen is more than 16K. It's like not a lot of space to write any code, but I was writing code. I was writing software to help me with my homework and with games for me and my brother. So this is the time where if you wanted to move your software from one place to another, you had to put it on a cassette tape and put the cassette tape in somebody else's tape recorder. It's old times. If you want to get your software published, it was published in a magazine, printed out in a magazine, and other people had to type it over from the magazine, or order the cassette tape that had some software on it. Old. I'm old. But I was making games, and then slowly I realized I was making tools to help me make games. So tools to create sprites that could fly over the screen. I wasn't writing the game, I was writing a tool to help a game designer. So I got those tools published as well. So I was making the life of game designers better by creating a certain tool. Later, when I actually got paid to do, actually I got paid for that as well. When you were sort of paid by the amount of code that was printed, and I ended up earning enough money to buy another bike, buy a bike. Later, when I was actually a professional job, I was working for a company that had bought a couple of other companies, and the reporting about the work that these companies were doing, these were all web agencies, the reporting of the work was done different. And management said, hey, can we not align the way of reporting? And people said, how can we do that? Well, we can align the way of working, and that way the reporting about the work will also be aligned. So let's work on aligning the way of working. It also meant that people could move from one team to another. They could get like best practices from another agency or sub-agency and look at it. So it had add-on benefits, but we started aligning the way of working. We started collecting best practices, standardizing work, creating templates, creating processes, and like maps like this that say, these are the steps we normally take, and these are the people that are involved, and these are our core principles behind how we work, how we do design. And I realized I like this kind of work. I like documenting design processes and standardizing deliverables so we can all talk about it in the same way. And yes, there's the benefit of reporting about it in the same way. So I did it again for another company called EasyGov, which had its own software and did work for a lot of tax agencies, international tax agencies. I spent some time on Jamaica working for the Jamaican tax government. What we did was, and this is the poster, our salespeople would take this poster to their presentation. You can't read a thing about it, right? You can't read a thing that's on there. But it showed that we had a process which helped us sell our work better. Sales benefited from us standardizing our way of working. But what we did in there was define roles. So on the left you see role titles. We defined the deliverables, we defined input, output, and the way deliverables flowed and influenced each other. And we wrote one-pagers for each of these deliverables that said, who's responsible for it, what's the type of input you need, what's the type of output, what kind of activities do you perform when you create this deliverable, where's the template, where's some guidance, some additional documentation. Excuse me. So I did it again. And then one more example was at a company where we had designers, or there were designers, and then the head of design realized we need another role, someone with a little bit more experience who talks about design work at a different level, and that was called UX strategist. I was one of the people that they hired. They promoted some people internally, and suddenly there was this new role that needed to function. And that changed the way that design was done. So we had to define how this new role changed the way it's working. The new role would have a different relationships with product managers or group product managers, a different relationship with the engineering team, basically no relationship with the engineering team, because the designers had relationships with the engineering teams. So defining this role and how someone could move from a designer to a design strategist, so in the sort of career advancement, was also defined in like a nice little matrix. All of these are examples of work where the circumstances for design was improved by mostly documentation projects, but then also the follow-up on those documentation, so procedures and ways of working, without a design ops team present. No one was design ops. But this work was being done. These initiatives were being executed. So design ops initiatives were being done, but it was done by people with the mindset and the genes, and not necessarily the role. And we were temporarily paid for it, but it was not on our job title. So this was a situation where people had the mindset, executed design ops initiatives. Then a couple of years ago, I moved to a company where there was a design ops team. Actually, there were multiple design ops teams, as I'll show. And I was in a role where I could use those design ops services. And I'll show you how that went. This was at a company called ServiceNow. Around that time, they had 10,000 employees. By the time I left, it was 17,500. Large software company, mostly US-based, that produces workflow software, where their customers could standardize their ways of working a little bit, or at least do suggestions for how work was being done. My role was director of design for a unit that was not a standard unit. Most of ServiceNow produced new versions of 50 software products every 6 months. Every 6 months, a new release of 50 products. My department was the X department, where everything was different, where everything had to go fast and innovative, and we could go fast and break things. It meant that we worked differently as well. Instead of every 6 months, we did a release every 6 hours, 6 days, 6 weeks, 3 months, faster. We had different teams. We had a small team, usually with a product manager, some tech lead, hopefully a designer, but usually first a researcher, and then a designer. We had sort of a SWAT team that could come in, help the team for a little bit, and go away again, instead of standard teams that would work on the same product for years and years and years. So we were different, which also meant I needed something different from the design ops teams. A little bit about ServiceNow. It had grown a lot. Like, this is sort of hockey stick stuff, and there's even, if you look at the dates, it's even worse than that, or the years, it's even worse than that. And around the time they had 50 employees, they bought another company, and that company had a design ops function. So they were introduced to the concept of design ops, and they started building out that team as the company grew as well. The company sort of like vertically looked like this. There was a CEO who was responsible for everyone, 12,500 people. Then there was the chief product officer, then the head of design, Greg Petrov, who Birgit just mentioned. Then senior directors, managers, and then the individual designers, or researchers, or writers, or software developers, or whatever. So Greg was responsible for the head of design, and he had people reporting to him sort of at the director or senior director level, and teams that were called DesignOps. And they would they would run programs, so there were program managers, they would run programs that improved the circumstances for design. Internal newsletter, or starting an internal newsletter, or all hands, or new tools, like let's move from Sketch to Figma. That's a program that takes work and needs preparation and rollout and research and whatever. So the design ops team were program managers and their leaders. They would run initiatives to improve the circumstances for design. There was also a design system team made up of designers and engineers. It was a total of 25 people with a pretty mature design system team, design system. And then there was a biz ops team for design, which did things like maintaining headcount or sort of doing negotiations about how many designers we can have versus engineers, or maybe we can have some front-end people move over to the design team because they're promising designers. Those kinds of responsibilities were held by the business ops team. They would also do communications. They would set up booths at conferences, stuff like that. Again, supporting the well-being of designers and making sure we could hire new designers if necessary and if the budget was there. All of these teams together is what I would now call design ops. They were all responsible for improving the circumstances of design. And they were there, and they were existing when I joined. They had all kinds of services that they provided, from services around defining processes and making sure that teams would follow the process and had instruments to follow the process, supporting actual execution of the work, again by tracking the work, defining the work, having making sure that planning was happening. Also, in the top right, release management, making sure that those events every 6 months where a new version was released would go smoothly, and the next 6 months could be planned. The program managers did, that's another example of a big program, moving to a new front-end environment. Big multi-year program that was supported by the program management team. And then things like newsletters, onboarding of new people, stuff like that. All of this was existing, and I'll show you some quick examples, like the the design system with this is a button and this is what it looks like. Career ladders for designers from level 1 to level 5 or 6, and different skills, and etc. And I know it's tiny print and it's not really important what's in there. Just the fact that we had them was useful. It was used when onboarding people, when we did annual performance reviews and stuff like that. We had a design review team, and I can tell you, and you can read it, but it's basically...
That's the sound of the police!
It's the design police. Sorry to scare you. Everything okay? To do it again?
That's the sound of the police!
Okay. Good morning. A lot of things were tracked. The workflow system had tracking in there, had analytics in there. So we had a lot of dashboards that would show the status of design work. And this is a long dashboard. But the funny or sad thing was, my projects were not in there, or the projects of my teams, the now X teams, were not represented in all of these dashboards. We were not represented in the newsletter. We were not invited to all hands even, because we were in a different department. We were in the X department. You're in the basement, in the garage. We're not part of the regular. So that needed to change. My situation was weird. I was reporting half to the head of design, half to the head of the now X department. The people that were sort of reporting to me weren't reporting to me. They were reporting to the people in the X department. It was weird. This was the standard product of ServiceNow, like a list of records, and if you clicked into it, a form. It's listen forms. It's a standard UI pattern. It was boring, but effective. Our deliverables look like this, or our products look like this. Plates of spaghetti and filters. Or hardware prototypes. We did Internet of Things applications where we were building prototypes in Lego. So out of all of these services, a lot of them needed to change. And I felt it was my responsibility to do that. It was my teams that needed these updated services. So I did a lot of coffee with a lot of people in these DesignOps teams to make sure that their services were also applicable to me. So even if there is a series of people or a set of people responsible for DesignOps, there may be still a reason for them to change their services based on your situation. But at least there are examples of relatively successful DesignOps teams and how they can operate, and I've shown you a little bit how they operate. Third situation is where I was the provider of DesignOps services. I was hired at Miro, that's why it's yellow. I was hired at Miro as their first DesignOps manager. Some people in the design department have been fighting for the creation of this role before I joined, so I don't know exactly how that happened. I wish I could tell you because it's an exciting process, and I want to know more about how that happens. But they had decided that it would be good for business to have a DesignOps manager, someone responsible for DesignOps initiatives. That was me. So my role was DesignOps manager, supporting 45 designers, researchers, writers, leaders, up to the head of design, and making sure that the circumstances of design were good for designers at Miro. When I joined them, I thought about this, and I said, okay, I will do 5 things. 5 things. I will make sure to do an inventory of DesignOps design problems and DesignOps potential solutions. And I will not do that just by myself. I will ask you, do an internal talks. I have a lot of conversations with people. I will also look at the DesignOps community outside with what kind of ideas they have. I will make sure that there's a constantly updated inventory of issues and potential solutions. That was a long list. So step 2 is prioritization. I would, together with my stakeholders, find out which of those initiatives were the most pressing, were the most important and urgent. And then whether they were realistic. So prioritization. Step number 3 is make sure that I'm not the only one doing the work on improving the design process or having invited presentations. Distribute the work. And here's a tip. If you can make sure that in the career ladders or the annual evaluations of people, there's a checkbox that says, did you help with DesignOps initiatives, yes or no? And it's a good thing if it's yes. Then you have a team of people who are motivated to help you with the execution of these DesignOps initiatives. And that makes your job easier. So distributing the work, making sure that the right people, like process freaks would be in the process definition team. People who had a big network were in the let's invite others to present in our at Miro team. So distributing the work, but then also coordinating, making sure that there's actual progress happening, and adjusting where necessary. And oh, sorry, one back. And finally, measuring the impact of these DesignOps initiatives to show that I'm worth my salary, basically, and that there is improvement in the way design is working and in the way DesignOps is working. My main tool was this roadmap. And you may have seen other formats for a roadmap, but this is my preferred format for a roadmap, where on the outer ring, there's stuff that you want to do now. So you have a lot of details about it. There's some more space for it. Stuff that you want to do now. Then there's a ring for stuff that you probably want to do next, where you think there's a good chance that can happen. And then there's the stuff that can happen later. And it all leads to this glorious star in the top, which is basically a copy of that definition from the Nielsen Norman article. That's the ultimate goal. And then it's divided in a couple of sectors. Somehow the DesignOps people love the P, so that's people, process, practice, and promotion of design. And then, and maybe I do a little click. All these post-it notes are either initiatives with links to the OKR or the KPI or whatever, like a goal that the initiative tries to achieve, and then a metric to see if you're actually approaching the goal. So there's these trios of an initiative, the OKR that it's supporting, and a metric to see how it's going, and they're all on the roadmap. So it's both a roadmap and a progress report, basically, a constantly updated progress report. I would discuss this roadmap at least every quarter with like the head of design and design leadership, sometimes more often. And we would pick initiatives and move them around and say, we can do these now, people are ready for it, or IT is ready for it, or whatever, or we need to move it to later. It's all post-it notes on a whiteboard, on a Miro board, of course. So one example would be, and I don't know if you can read this, but it says, evangelize the product design process and some variants. We had made an attempt at defining our way of working, our design process, but not everyone was aware of it. It needed some more promotion, and there were some attempts at making variants of this process for different subgroups. And sometimes they were right and they needed their variant promoted. Sometimes they needed their variant to move back into the main process. Long story. These are goals for the different sectors. I had goals for the sectors as well, and I agreed on those with the design leadership. This example of the evangelizing a product design process, the product design process looked like this. A lot of small things. Like from top to, at the top is basically the product development lifecycle. So there's the discover phase and the define phase and the design and research phase. So phases of the process, and then for each phase, a description of the goal that designers have, their deliverables, activities, the way they collaborate with others, and then the highlights are different teams that are affected, the design system team or the accessibility team or internationalization team or research team, different teams that were affected. A lot of detail, and like I said, it needed some evangelization. It needed some measuring whether people were actually following the process, yes or no. So there was work necessary on this process. Another initiative that we run at Miro was planning and tracking design projects. Yes, we had Jira, and that was the official source of truth for projects. But in the planning phase, which happened every quarter, the design leaders, like Jira was the sort of source of truth, but in the meantime, there were all kinds of plans for the next quarter that weren't necessarily in Jira already. So they needed a tool to document which projects were even considered to be included in the next quarter or the quarter after that. And that turned out to be done best by an Excel sheet or a Google Sheet in this case. A Google Sheet which helped the different teams track their projects in the planning stage. So which ones are considered, which ones are high priority, which ones are large or extra large projects versus small projects, which designer are we going to put on it. So we could also do some capacity mapping. There was a tab at the bottom for capacity. So we could track the impact of the changing plans during the quarter or during the planning. And then once the planning was final, we could use the same tool to track progress. So we could track which phase the project was in, whether designers had changed, where the documentation was, where the Miro board was, where the Figma file was, and also columns for team health and any risks that were associated with the project. So it was tracking work. Again, outside of Jira, because Jira wasn't perfect in this sense. Another initiative, and I'll do 2 or 3 more to show you what kind of design ops initiatives were being run there, and which ones you could consider running in your organization. One of Miro's company values was iteration. So iterating your work, which means showing it to somebody else and getting feedback. So feedback meetings were, there were quite a lot of them, and the post-it notes are types of review meetings that designers were involved in. And I developed guidelines for those meetings. Who should be there? How often should you do those meetings? What kind of input should you bring? What kind of feedback can you expect? What to do next afterwards? And I did that for about 12 or 14 types of reviews. We had a lot. Another one was a bot, some kind of automation, a bot that would kick in as soon as someone mentioned the word bug or design bug. And the bot would kick in and say, hey, can you tell me which area of the product we're talking about, which feature? Is it a visual bug or is it a functional bug? Let me know about it. The bot would generate dashboards that would show which teams had the most bugs reported, and also things like in the bottom right, how soon are bugs resolved after they were created. I already mentioned invited presentations. This is Peter Merrill's talking about design leadership roles and responsibilities. The one person you see there in the audience is one of our design leaders, Dominic, or Miro's design leaders, Dominic. There were more people attending. It wasn't just Dominic and me. So inviting presentations by others so you can build a shared terminology, shared culture. Oh yeah, and then I try to track work, both design work, so how is the design organization doing, a list of metrics, as well as how is DesignOps doing, a list of metrics that I wanted to track and wanted to be held responsible for. And these are dependent on the company, so you can take pictures if you want, but pick the ones that are relevant for you. So this roadmap was important for me. Like I said, it was both sort of planning as well as tracking. So for me, it was an important deliverable as DesignOps Manager at Miro. So that was the many ways I was confronted with how DesignOps, either the mindset or the role, helps teams do their work better, design teams do their work better. But enough about me. What should you learn from this? You should understand by now that DesignOps is there to support design teams, improve the circumstances for design. There are many ways in which this can happen. I've shown you mine, but there's research articles that give you overviews of how this can be done and what different aspects of design support can be delivered. You may find different people responsible for different aspects of design operations. It can be multiple teams. You may need to have coffee with them. You may need to build relationships with them. There are many ways DesignOps services can be delivered and clustered. This is just one of them. If you are responsible for DesignOps, or even if as a group you feel responsible for tracking and managing DesignOps initiatives, these are the 5 steps that I think you should be taking. And the roadmap, something like this, is a very useful tool. You don't have to have the role of a DesignOps manager or design operator to do this. If you have the mindset, if you have the gene, if you every now and then take a step back and with others think about how you can improve the circumstance for design, you're doing the right thing. You are not alone. There are many people out there who are doing the same thing. Join one of those communities. My name is Peter Boersma. I'm a design operator. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. I definitely identify as a research ops mindset person. Just a quick question to the audience. After seeing this, who of you is like, oh yeah, I'm kind of into that. I'm digging that. Yes, Paco?
Yes.
Yeah, good.
Join us.
Exactly. Paco's like, I have a question. Okay, go ahead. If the mic is on. Can we get a mic? Try again, Paco?
Hello?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Hi.
Hi.
Peter. I'm a DesignOps professional myself.
Yay.
Yay. So I had a question about bringing people along, I guess, because you did mention that you started with a mindset. It's a similar journey to the one I've had where people didn't have a dedicated role, but they started doing the work. But throughout, I think the biggest challenge has been bringing people along and dealing with people feeling like a part of their job is being taken over and potentially responsibility is being transferred. And then similarly, people adopting something that they're being told is now standard. So do you have any thoughts or experience with that?
One question, who were the people who felt threatened that responsibility?
Leadership.
Leadership, okay. Okay, then it's basically a matter of talking to their leaders what they should be held accountable for. And it's probably not managing the Figma account. And it's probably not necessarily building design culture. Maybe not. But making a case for this being done by people who are like 100% motivated to do it, with their managers is probably the way to go. So you may need to go over their head. But also, like I said, if you can manage to make design ops part of everyone's responsibility by writing it into the job descriptions and saying, hey, you can be a junior at design ops, or a beginner and intermediate and professional at running design ops initiatives, and make it a shared responsibility. It's not just them you're taking it away from. It's sort of you're distributing it to everyone, and it will build people's skills and allow people, their designers, to also grow their skills. So again, it should be seen as something positive. And yeah, I realize I'm saying it should be. There should be world peace, but there isn't. But you can try, you can hope. Part B of your question was?
It was also about change management, like resistance to change.
Yes, resistance to change. I know. I guess that, like, as with a lot of design work, it's about storytelling, finding the right arguments that will hit, if there's resistance somewhere, if you can make it so that you're not telling the story, but other teams, their peers, are telling the story of how they benefited from adopting a process or starting using a different tool for prototyping or whatever. So it's not just you telling them, hey, I'm the DesignOps Manager, you should be doing this, but hey, here are your peers, and they've benefited from this, listen to them. So finding a couple of people who are receptive, work with them on creating basically a case study, and then having them tell the story is often much more effective than if you need to tell the story.
Thank you.
I would like to take one more question because it's coming up quite a bit.
Yep.
So from your perspective, from what size onwards would it start to make sense to have a dedicated role?
Okay, I would love to say from 2 people on, because as soon as there's 2 people that need to agree on terminology, on process, on tooling, on when they want to be engaged in projects. So 1, 2, and anything beyond that. Having a dedicated person do this, the consensus in the design ops industry is that around 15 people, and it could be it could be a group of designers and researchers and writers all grouped together, would benefit from a dedicated ops person. And then, yes, that person needs to do design ops and research ops and writing ops. But there's a lot of overlap in all of that. Although yesterday we had the story from Julian about research ops, and yes, I realize there are definitely also skills and tools and procedures that are specific to research ops. But if you have that gene to be an ops person, taking on research ops beyond design ops is probably not that big of a step. So let's say I'm going to say what the consensus is in the design ops industry: 15.
Good. Clear answer. 15 is the answer today. All right, have a beautiful coffee break. Get talking about what's going on in design ops in your company, and we'll see you all back at 10:55, either here, workshops rooms, or the slot. Have a beautiful day today. And thank you.